Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy, and I am the Pulpwood Queen reporting live from my little cabin in the woods called Murphy's Law here in East Texas. And when something always doesn't go right, I'm of the philosophy, try until you get it right again. Murphy's Law struck. I had filmed this whole 2022 March Books of the Month, and the video disappeared. So I love these books so much. Here we go again. So I'm going to begin with our 2022 Book of the Month. The book is called The Cicada Tree. It's by Robert Gwaltney. It's incredible cover. Robert is a graduate of Florida State University, and he resides in Atlanta, Georgia. By day, he serves as vice president of Easter Seals, North Georgia, a nonprofit organization that strengthens children and their families during the most critical times in development. Through his not-profit work, he is a champion for early childhood literacy. Robert also serves as fiction editor for the Blue Mountain Review, and in all the hours in between, he writes. The Cicada Tree is his debut novel. Visit him at www.robertlgwaltney.com. Well, Robert is also a dear friend of mine, and he is the co-host of my book and film club because he's as crazy about books and films as I am. So I invited him to join me, and we have so much fun because we like to dress up for our Saturday night book and film club meeting. So I'm going to begin with the first chapter of his book because I really feel like to truly understand why I pick the books that I pick, I think you need to hear the author's words themselves, and you are in for a real treat. It begins. Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. W.B. Yeats, The Stolen Child. Chapter 1, Providence, Georgia, 1956. A storm was coming. Way off in the distance, its inky edges began to spoil the late morning sky. A low roll of thunder grumbled from the ground, tickled the bottom of my bare feet. How many more? Annie Mae said, holding the front of her dress out before her like a basket. A bushel or two. I plucked another cicada shell from the bark of a pine that grew in the far corner of Mama's old thinking spot. Annie Mae giggled. I love you a bushel and a peck, she sang, her voice holding a sort of magic that shot clean through like winter static. Through anyone who listened, I smiled, the corners of my mouth pulling back from the lovely sound. A bushel and a peck? I laid the shell gently to rest with the others. Annie Mae blinked down into the mound of casings. Where did they all come from? I spooled the length of my hair around my finger. From the ground, I said, pulling my finger free, leaving a perfect curl down the front of my blouse. That's what your granny says. I stood tall, placing my hands on my hip, speaking deep in my best Miss Wessie voice. They needs room to grow. Annie Mae squinted her eyes and she giggled. 13 years had passed. 13 long years since the cicadas had last came. Years before Annie Mae and I were born. Now they return, digging loose from the earth, attaching themselves to trees, leaving behind a fragile crop of amber-tinted shells. It was the cicadas singing I remember best, their courting song. It was this frenetic beckoning for the affection of another that stirred the human air to reckless speeds that summer, the summer I turned 11. The earth grumbled again. Sure must be a dark, lonely place down there, Annie Mae said. I reckon so. I eyed a shell as big as a ping pong. Annie Mae hummed slow and sad, the quality of it, a drape blocking away the happy. I knew then before she would speak of whom she was thinking. Poor sweet mama, she said, looking down at the ground, dark and lonely. Annalise Newell, Annie Mae Johnston, Miss Wessie yelled from the back porch, get your fannies back up on in this house. Shh. I touched my finger to Annie Mae's lips. That had been a game of ours, evading Miss Wessie. Our warden that summer and 3 before. Our mamas knew one another from packing pickles into jars at the Mayfield Pickle Company. My mama at the white table and Aunt Mays at the colored. You got till I drop these biscuits and dumplings, Miss Wessie said. Then I'm breaking off a switch. Ooh, then I'm breaking off a switch, I mimicked, puffing up my chest, grabbing hold of my hips, hoping to bring Etta May back from thoughts of her poor dead mama. To dissolve the sadness, she sang into the air. A gust of wind swept across the old garden, dozens of husks blowing free from Etta May's apron. Best hurry. Get on over to the bench, I motioned to the rickety seat. Etta May settled herself on the splitting wood, mindful of the delicate cargo gathered up in the front of her dress. I wish you didn't have to go. Me neither, she said, smiling, but I knew it was only half true. I was certain she was singing she loved best, even more than me. Even if it was singing at a stranger's funeral, I'm ready. I nodded a glance off into the horizon, a swirl of smoky clouds moving across a perfect plain of blue. I still held the enormous shell I pulled last from the tree. This one first. I positioned the prickly appendages into a coarse plate across the top of the center of her head. I made busy placing several more. How's it looking? I stepped back to regard my work. Just one more. Girls, Mama hollered from the house, the last dumpling's been dropped. Etta May took in a quick breath of air. I tucked the cicada shell into the pocket of my dress. You look beautiful, I admired the crown I made. Miss Cicada Bug 1956. I kissed her cheek. We best get. Etta May touched her hand to her face. Granny's done dropped the last. She hopped from the bench, letting loose the hem of her dress. Our work released to the rising wind. Come on, she said, grabbing hold of my hand. A whirl of storm blew my hair about my face. Etta May pulled at me, but I held firm, my toes pinching the ground. An errant shell clung to strands of my hair. I watched as it bucked in the gale until it let loose at last, lifted by the current, sucked away into the newly darkened sky. A shiver shot up my back. Only then did I loosen my toes from the earth, letting Etta May untether me from the spot. Only once did I turn back, just long enough to watch the first lightning strike, the moment the sky caught fire. The sky boomed, rattling the walls of our clapboard house, jostling the windows in their shoddy frames. Etta May and I passed the hour at Daddy's old upright, attempting to rehearse the stranger's funeral song. Etta May's gift was singing and mine, the piano, each of us the perfect accompaniment to the other. Though I never played it before, Stormy Weather was the only song my heart could remember, as though it were the only song that ever was. I always knew how to play, where my fingers would go. An instinct planted way down deep, just as easy as breathing. Daddy thought it'd been he who taught me, but I knew long before, back before I first opened my eyes to the world. It was easy pretending just a little lie. I chose to be close, if just for a spell. But that was when he loved us, Mom and me, before he drank away all the good. Sure is pretty, Miss Wessie hollered from the kitchen. The two of you could coach an angel right down from heaven. Don't it make you sad, I said, singing for dead folks? She sucked in her bottom lip and then let it loose. No, not really. She cast her green flecked eyes down at her hands, running them the length of her fingers. But I knew the truth of it. Somewhere in that deep down spot where the music lived and swirled, I knew when she sang for her poor sweet mama. Percussion rolled above us, vibrating the floorboards. Piano keys shivered. Everywhere was music, even in the clink of Mommy's jelly jar glass. Wish I could go with you. My voice sounded peculiar amidst the storm's refrain. Me too. Etta May sat down next to me on the piano bench, leaning her head against my shoulder. But you get to go to the Mayfields. She feathered her fingers across my arm. Folks say the whole town could fit right inside their house. I guess. I contemplated the size of such a place. The place Mama went on Saturdays to earn extra money. Must take a long time to clean. Maybe you could play with Marlesa. Marlesa, such a pretty name. I poked gently at the cicada shell hidden inside my pocket. In truth, I knew very little of the Mayfields or their daughter, Marlesa. Mama never spoke of them, and I had yet to see one up close and in the flesh, only the passing of their long black car through town, the world caught and reflected in the sheen of its dark windows. One more time, Miss Wessie said from the kitchen, then it's dressing time. The rain dissipated. The weight of Miss Wessie's feet across the floorboards audible once more. Anna May lifted her head from my shoulder. The cicada shell shifted in my pocket, the sharp tips of its legs sticking into my skin, grabbing hold round my finger. I flicked at the thing until it turned loose, my fingers finding their place on the keys. Anna May did not wait for my music, finishing the song, finding the song within her without the help of a single note of mine. I pulled my hands from the piano and I listened, sorrow seeping from the perfect pitch of her soprano. I sat, eyes shut, letting her enchantment settle over me, feeling a tingle under my skin, the weight of the thing growing until it sat heavy, pressing against my inside until there was nothing left for me to do but cry. Rain fell against the tin. At first a smattering, the tempo gaining speed, the force greater until there was no other sound. Nothing left of the music but a deafening whir and the vinegary taste of sadness on my tongue. Words, beautiful words. This is a treasure. I hope you'll all read our 2022 Book of the Month, The Cicada Tria novel by Robert Gwaltney. All right. Now, next up, we're going to be having our International Book of the Month because we are the International Pulpwood Queens and Timber Guys Book Club. And it's very important that we read books from around the world because the more we read, the more we understand, the more we accept people that are different from us, other cultures, peoples, more kindness and empathy comes into our being. And this one is a real treat. It's called Guesthouse for Ganesha. It's by Judith Teitelman. It's a novel. I love the cover. Get to the page. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some monetary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house and empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thoughts, shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Rumi, beautiful words. I'll read the prologue. Dance, he whispered ever so softly. Dance without memory of your heart being sundered. Dance, never knowing. Sorrow and pain ever kissed your lips. Move, feel again, recapture yourself, who you were at 3 when your song was pure and electric possibilities. Come, dance with me. He peered down at her with the eyes the color of fawn and looked clearly into her soul. His trunk gently touched her right cheek. With his one free hand, he carefully lifted her out of bed. Esther took no notice that her linens and the quilt were thoroughly soaked, or that instead of her muslin nightdress, she was wearing layer upon layer of a diaphanous silk. She floated in his forearms and let him guide her around the room. Though it was no more than the size of a small closet, somehow there was a space enough for leaps and twirls. To an outsider's eyes, they made an awkward and ungainly pair. She barely 5 foot tall and slender as a rod. He towering at 8 feet with a voluminous belly and extraordinary countenance. Still, their partnership was graceful and fluid in the music, an interweaving of bells, horn, tablas, and sitar, seamlessly melded with their steps, as though the composition had been created solely for this dance. Esther felt safe, a feeling long forgotten. It was though she were once again in her mother's womb, floating in warmth. When the cabin door flew open, they danced onto the deck, now more than ever to the motion of the waves not far below. They journeyed in contented silence, words unessential. This was the liberation of movement, the release of the past and all that had held her captive. After some time, dancing in great abandon, Esther even lost sight of her partner as she whirled and twirled without benefit of support. It was a beautiful, crisp fall night, the first calm sea experience since leaving port. The 4 days prior had been stormy with giant swells, and most of the passengers had severe seasickness. But tonight the sea, and with it the ship, were at peace and gliding easily through the deep. A young couple decided to take advantage of the night's tranquility and went for a stroll around the deck. They came on a barefoot Esther spinning and leaping, completely oblivious to her surroundings. Fearful she would soar over the railing, the man grabbed her, and immediately Esther began to mumble, incoherently it seemed, about a man, about an elephant, and freedom. My God, he yelled, she's burning up. Get a doctor. Within minutes, Esther was back in her bed, covered in cloths filled with ice. The ship's doctor forced a few pills down her throat. The pure bliss of the past few hours dissipated. Her teeth chattered without control, and her body shook violently. Soon her being began to relax as the drugs seeped into her bloodstream, their power taking dominance over that which had brought her to such a state of joy. A tear formed in one eye and slowly rode down the curves of her face before she drifted into a deep sleep and whispered, "Tadoos." Guesthouse for Ganesha, a novel by Judith Teitelman, our international March book of the month. Well, now I'm moving on to, we have 2 bonus books of the month for the International Book Club. And I'm going to start out first with the book by James Garrison. He's a Texas author from Houston. What Seems True. It's a novel. James, and this is a portrait of him, but they've got a picture of him on the back here. After years practicing law, James Garrison changed course to writing when he was paid to go away in a corporate merger. His first novel, QL4, based on his time as a military policeman in the Mekong Delta, has won awards for literary and military fiction. And his most recent novel, The Safecracker, a legal thriller, was a finalist in the 2020 Eric Hoffer Book Awards. His creative nonfiction and fiction works and poems have appeared in literary magazines and anthologies. Landing in Houston, Texas as a young corporate attorney for Texaco, he set out on a long study of Texas lore and landscapes, traveling with his family to see as much of his adopted state as possible. But most of his sojourns in the early Texas years ended up at the refineries and chemical plants in the Golden Triangle. The setting for What Seems True. He has a website. It's www.jamesgarrison-author.com. Chapter 1, One Ranger. The day after they found Billy Graham's body out behind the old Starlight Drive-In Theater, a Texas Ranger came down to the refinery to investigate. I was there since I'd driven over from Houston that morning to meet Perry Como, the HR manager. Instead of discussing his troubles with the union, we spent my first cup of coffee and 2 donuts rehashing what he'd heard about the murder. From Perry's office, I could see the stairs leading up the ground floor of the administration building. It was a hot October day in the Texas Gulf Coast, and his hall door was wide open to let in some fresh air, or as fresh as it gets less than 100 yards from the refinery's hydrocracking unit. Only halfway listening to Perry, I watched as the head and shoulders of a big man hove into view in the dim stairwell like a submarine from the deep. First came a white Stetson, then a camel hair sports coat and shirt with a bolo tie, followed by creased blue jeans tucked into a handsome pair of tan cowboy boots. We knew he was coming. This being the South in the waning days of Jimmy Carter and the Klan, still holding sway in the neck of the woods. A lot of people were interested in how and why the refinery's first Black supervisor had met his end, and who killed him. The Port Oso police were investigating, as was the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. Even the FBI was nosing around, although they hadn't offered to send an agent. But Derek Frazier, the Port Oso plant manager, had demanded that the state police get involved, and not just any run-of-the-mill DPS officer. He wanted the Texas Rangers, and lo, here within hours was a Ranger. He was unlike any I had ever read about or seen in the movies or in real-life photographs. Gaunt, with sun-baked leathery skin, mustached cavaliers, such as this the man was not. With a wheeze, he came to a halt on the landing and leaned with one hand on the railing. He was built like a bull and wide as a pickup truck. An expansive white shirt bulged over a finely worked leather belt and a shiny brass buckle big enough to cover the prodigious belly above it. His coat flapped open, and I caught a glimpse of the long barrel silver pistol in a leather holster tied down to his thigh, just like he was John Wayne. Merely an unlearned immigrant to the state, I wasn't sure that real Texas Rangers still existed, but here was the living proof. Even if the legendary mold formed by years of riding horseback through the chaparral and arroyos in West Texas in pursuit of Comanches, cattle thieves, and train robbers had been shattered and recast by long automobile drives over ranch to market roads and platters of chicken fried steak and mashed potatoes in small town cafes. Perry and I hurried out to greet him, and a large paw engulfed my stubby hand, accompanied by "Howdy" in bass. He took a deep breath. "Name's Rogers, Leroy R. Rogers, but everybody calls me Roy." "Dan Esperson," I said, struggling not to cringe at his grip. "I'm a company lawyer." Releasing my hand and removing his hat, he wiped beads of sweat from his forehead with a white handkerchief that appeared out of nowhere. "Pretty lady downstairs said you'd be employee relations." Whisking the handkerchief back into his pocket, he took Perry's hand and pumped it. Perry's round head and shoulders bobbed up and down. "Yes, sir, that's me. Human resources is what we call it these days. I'm John Como, except everybody calls me Perry, like they call you Roy." The Ranger gave him a quizzical look as he dropped Perry's hand. "He means Perry Como, the singer," I said. "Aha!" The Ranger chuckled and looked truly amused. "Come on in," Perry said. And he stared back through the open door in his office, then turned a little to the right and yelled into another door coming down the hall. "Hey, Sheila, bring us a jug of coffee and another cup, and bring the rest of those donuts." He twisted back the Ranger. "You'd like a donut, wouldn't you?" "Thank you, sir, but no thank you. I'm on a diet." The Ranger patted his stomach on the side away from his six-shirter, or whatever it was. "I'm no expert on guns." Once in his office, Perry motioned toward the conference table, a rectangular piece of solid maple that projected in a 90-degree angle out from the front of the desk. The desk, the table, and chairs were far older than I was, but in better shape, sturdy and polished to a dark gloss with only a few scratches here and there. The office wasn't large, and to the small anteroom where Perry's secretary and assistant kept watch for him. The office white stucco walls were adorned with HR plaques and awards, and a single 24 by 12 color photograph showing two men in hard hats. One of them, Perry, pointing out down at something on the ground, the refinery cracking towers looming behind them. A pair of endangered shorebirds had taken up residence at the wastewater pond, Perry had told me, and he'd found a clutch of eggs in their nest. The ranger pulled out a chair and he sat down, shifting his buttocks to one side to make room for his gun inside the chair arm. Perry and I took the chairs across the table from him. Looking out the window past Perry's head, I could see a tangle of silver and gray metal piping and spindly towers giving off clouds of steam. But the hot white vapor, the ghostly fabric of the refinery, stretched out to coastal marshland where it met a pastel blue sky. So tell me about this boy of yours who got himself killed the other night, the ranger said. Maybe we can figure out what happened and get this thing wrapped up by lunch. Know just the place, Perry said. He leaned forward in his chair. Lunch was always a priority for Perry when he had visitors. Great little Mexican restaurant, he reached up at his hat. I saw why his face had lit up all of a sudden. Sheila had appeared in the connecting doorway to the outer office. She was carrying a tray with a silver thermos of coffee, an orphan mug from the Texas State Fair, and loose packets of creamer and sugar. The ranger struggled to his feet and tipped his hat to her. Shorter than the ranger, but tall for a woman, Sheila displayed a limber, athletic physique. She was dressed in light gray slacks fitted snugly across her hips and a thin pink sweater stretched tautly across her chest. Sheila Mills, my administrative assistant, Perry said, also rising. We don't have secretaries anymore. As we all knew, the change was only a name. Pleased to meet you, ma'am, said the ranger. Roy Rogers. He held out his hand to her. Sheila hesitated, then timidly poked his hand forward. Are you really a Texas Ranger? She asked, her eyes wide. They darted over at me and I smiled at her. Always made sure to get to know the secretaries, whoever they were called. She was one of the most pleasurable ones to know. Been a ranger 35 years, placing his hat on the table, and the ranger pulled his coat aside to display a round silver badge with a star. He ran a thick index finger across the bottom of the circle, and the word said, Texas Ranger. Well, I'm going to stop there, but as you can see, this is a Texas story, and it's a little larger than life. I hope you all will read James Garrison, What Seems True, a novel, our international, one of our bonus book club selections. And last, I'm going to read Wayland. It's a novel by Rita Sims Quillen, beautiful cover. And it begins. I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everyone else. Oscar Wilde, The Importance of Being Earnest. Chapter 1, Spring, 1930. When Buddy Newman walked into the dusty little southwestern Virginia town of Gate City, he made sure he had his road face on, a menacing and mysterious dead-eyed stare that would help him survive in the encampment of hobos and tramps down along the creek not far from the train yard. Once he moved out of the camp and settled on a place of action, chose his patsies or hatched a new scam, he would change himself from inside out. He can fill himself up with anything he needs, get bigger or smaller, stay fluid, or form a solid wall. Buddy'd only been in town a couple of days, but he already had a pretty good idea of the lay of the land as far as the world was concerned. The town had a surprisingly large encampment, what was known in the hobo world as the jungle. Probably somewhere between 15 and 25 people every night, just at the edge of town, right off the main street. They had names like T-Bone, Chicken, Guzzle, and Pip. Almost every town of any size that had a railroad access had an encampment of some kind, a desolate, depressing swath of ugliness with blankets thrown over tree limbs, making little pathetic tents. Sometimes crates that had carried produce would be taken apart and nailed into a little box the size of a chicken coop, with boards or pieces of rusted tin for a roof. In Gates City, the hobo stayed beside a narrow creek that ran along the lower street. It was a shady place and far enough from any street or house that there wasn't too much complaint unless a disturbance or some vandalism or thieving occurred. Buddy's real name was Dexter Deal, and he left home from Bluefield, West Virginia 4 years before. Holding on to the name seemed like a bad idea under the circumstances. And besides, even the other railroad bums with no secrets told him right off that nobody ever used their real name out here. Too much log breaking to be done, they said. So he chose the name Buddy Newman because he wanted to always remember to be everybody's buddy and because he was going to be a new man and make a new life. He was proud of his cleverness. Buddy liked to ride the blinds, the little platform on the front of the cars, but it was unpleasant. You could eat enough soot, gravel, and dust to kill you, but at least you weren't hiding away in a bunch of stinking livestock or waiting to get caught and beat up by some mean railroad thug. He rode into Gate City on a long coal train, jumping off one of the black car blinds, just a few yards from the train's engine halt in the station. He always did that. He didn't want to be close enough to the engine for anyone to see him at the station. It was better just to walk into town with no one having any idea how you got there and no railroad bulls bash you with their clubs or calling the local sheriff. He started walking at 9 months. His mom had told him in between her drunken stupors. So life comprised mainly of just walking miles and miles, many days, or running to catch a train car suited him just fine. He might have stayed in Bluefield, except the only sane, caring people he knew, his grandparents on his mother's side, had died a couple months apart. While his mother had conveniently gone off with one of her gap-toothed, mouth-breathing boyfriends and left Dexter to handle all the messy stuff at the end. His father, Abraham, was long gone, thank God. Mr. Deal's only talent had been cruelty. Dexter's worst memory of childhood was his dog punishing him for something he didn't do by hanging the family dog from a tree by a chain and making Dexter stand and watch him swat it with a bat. A hideous yelp coming from every pass until finally it was quiet. When his grandmother followed her husband to the family plot, Dexter saw to it that they were buried proper with the cell of the few animals they still had left. He kept his grandfather's pocket watch, knife, hunting rifle, and an old pistol. He gave the keys to the old house to the neighbor, Mr. Williams, with instructions that after 1 year his mother didn't return to claim it, Mr. Williams could sell the place. Keep 10% of whatever it brought and mail the rest to Buddy in care of the Salvation Army mission there in Gate City. The town had been a good choice for the mail drop location because it had a good train service from everywhere. And he had a friend there, one of the Salvation Army sisters, Molly Kate O'Donnell, was a friend he'd grown up with. He'd always joked with her about being a donut Christian because he only showed up at missions and churches for sweets, strong coffee, and conversations. They both had a good laugh about it. She knew there was probably no hope of changing him, but she would never stop trying. Buddy had been riding the trains and working odd jobs for these long years that felt like forever. A very long life for a hobo. I'm going to stop there, but you can see they've got it all set up for this incredible story said back in the 30s. Wayland, a novel by Rita Sims Quillen. This is our second bonus book club selection. Now, all our international Pulpwood Queens and Timber Guys book club selections can be found, the entire list, on our website, www.thepulpwoodqueens.com. And our calendar of events is up on the website, and everything you really need to know about all the programs and things that we do are up on our website. If you would like to join the Pulpwood Queens, all you have to do is go to our Facebook page. It's the official International Pulpwood Queens and Timber Guys Book Club Reading Nation. Join, it's free. And also join our Kathy L. Murphy channel on YouTube. It's free. Hit subscribe and do hit the bell icon so that you can get advanced notification of every video that we're posting. We have lots of programs. Mandy Haynes and I have been creating a lot this year. We've got our Writers Club, we've got our Book and Film Club, we've got our, of course, our International Pulpwood Queens and Timber Guys Book Club. We've got 2 new children's initiatives, Mama Cat's Book Club and the Cool Cat Club, which is for middle readers and crossover into adults. We hope that all of you will check them out. And the Zoom links are usually found on my page, the website, or under events on the page of that entity. If you have any questions, email me, thepulpwoodqueen@gmail.com. But promise me that you'll email me an hour before the event starts, because I'm always getting ready for the event. I got to get my tiara on, man. It's mandatory. Our motto is where tiaras are mandatory and reading good books is a rule. And our sole mission of the Pulpwood Queens Book Club is to promote authors, books, literacy, reading, and storytelling through all the arts, whether it's screenplay writing of films or whether it's songwriting of songs. We always try to feature the best of the best. And I always give every one of my book club selections, my official ones are reading stamp of approval and this tag quote, the Pulpwood Queen's diamonds in her tiara. That is my highest mark on all my books. So I am now reading for 2023. You can go to the author member page on our website at www.thepulpwoodqueens.com. You do have to join, but when you join, you get featured in our international newsletter. And there is a form that you fill out where you can put your book and download your images of your author photo and book photo. And there's benefits to joining too, because we have a magazine with very affordable advertising for you, whether you're picked or not picked. It is a magazine to get all of our author members' books in the hands of our thousands of readers around the world. We've started over 800 chapters since I began the spring of 2000. So we're going into our 22nd year. And it's been an amazing trip. It's been lots of ups and downs, but the one thing I know is this is my life. This is what I plan on doing the rest of my life, is having everybody join together in the conversation with our authors, because that conversation is what makes us human. And it gives us more empathy and kindness in this world. And I truly do believe the more we will read and read about everybody in this world, the sooner we'll finally get to world peace. It's a tough world out there today with COVID and everything that's happening in the Ukraine. I pray on this daily, and I hope everybody really recognizes that one person can make a difference just by speaking out and reading a book and telling others, we have got to stand up for peace. So thank you for joining me. As I always say, it's all about the story. So see you at one of our events. Tiara on, they're mandatory. Guys, you can wear a ball cap. We just want to crown everybody kings and queens, because we deserve that. As readers, we all deserve to wear the crown. Thank you so much. Have a blessed Sunday, and we'll see you next time here on the Kathy L. Murphy channel. Bye for now.